180 years ago, the broad gauge railway reached Exeter from Bristol. A station was built here in the St David's area of the city. Initially, it had one platform shared by both up and down trains. 2 years later, the first stage of the South Devon Railway to Plymouth opened as a single track as far as Newton Abbot. There had been at least 4 plans put forward in the early 1840s for railways to Plymouth, but the route that was finally chosen was approved by Parliament in July 1844. It was to follow the River Exe and the Tean to Newton Abbot and then cross some hilly terrain on the southern side of Dartmoor towards Plymouth. Despite the increase in traffic, all trains used the southern end of this single platform. Brunel was hired as engineer, and while he thought steam engines could cope with the gradients along the river estuary, he was less convinced about the steeper sections either side of Totnes, where the gradient was going to be as much as 1 in 36. So he turned to a revolutionary idea, the atmospheric railway. It involved laying a 15-inch pipe between the rails, as seen here at the Didcot Railway Centre. The front carriage of the train had a piston hanging from it which slotted into the pipe. Stationary steam engines located every few miles along the line pumped air from the pipe in front of the piston, forming a vacuum. A greased leather flap covered the slot in the pipe, preventing air from getting in and destroying the vacuum. With the vacuum in the pipe ahead of the piston, the pressure of the atmosphere behind it pushed the train forward, causing it to move. Here's an artist's impression of the atmospheric railway in a pub sign along the way. The first pumping station was housed here, where the signal box now stands at Exeter St David's Station. There were 2 40-horsepower vertical engines inside, operating in pairs. Further engines pumped in the water to make the steam, which was stored in a pond or a tank nearby. This watercolour by William Dawson shows the pumping station at Exeter around the time of construction. It can be seen today, along with other prints, in the Museum of the South Devon Railway at Buckfast-Lea. Brunel built an 8-span timber bridge over the River Exe immediately south of St David's Station. It's now been replaced by this more modern structure as part of the city's flood defence scheme. Next we come to Exeter St Thomas Station. This building dates from 1861. The station originally had a roof covering both the tracks and the platforms, but that was demolished in the 1970s. Either side of the station is a 62-arch, 548-yard-long viaduct. The line through here was doubled in 1855. 2 tracks were needed to deal with congestion, which led to some trains taking more than 6 hours to make the journey from Exeter to Plymouth. If you look under the arches, you can see where there are 2 styles of brickwork, which marks where the line was doubled. Heading south along the Exe estuary, we pass the site of the next pumping station at Countess Weir. Trains started running along here as far as Teignmouth in May 1846. But as the pipes for the atmospheric railway hadn't yet been laid, steam locomotives were used to pull the carriages. The line opened as far as Newton Abbot 7 months later. This is the site of Exminster Station, opened in 1852 and closed to passengers in 1964. There were 4 tracks here so that express trains could pass slower stopping services. This shot was taken from the same bridge as the previous one, but 30 years earlier. The signal box was later moved to Broadway on the Gloucestershire and Warwickshire Railway. Close to the famous Turf Lock pub on the Exeter Canal was the 3rd pumping station. Test trains using atmospheric propulsion started in February 1847 as far as here, with 4 daily services to Teignmouth added in the late summer. There's nothing left of the Turf Lock pumping station now. It was where those trees are, and you can still see the pond which used to hold the water to supply the steam engines. And so to Star Cross, where the building that houses the pumping engines can still be seen. It's Grade 1 listed and is the last of 4 built with local red sandstone. The engine house may have survived, but Brunel's great enterprise was in trouble from the start. The leather seals on the pipes leaked, especially in cold weather, and consequently the pumping stations were using a lot more coal to make the vacuum than had been budgeted for. The actual running cost was more than 7p a mile higher than for a locomotive-hauled railway. Despite the failings, though, you can still drink a toast to Brunel in the pub opposite the station. Soon after leaving Starcross, we reached Dawlish Warren, which opened as Warren Halt in July 1905. It was renamed Warren Platform 2 years later and became Dawlish Warren on the 1st of October 1911. There are 2 fast lines and 2 slow lines here. This signal box is a fake. It stands where the station buildings used to be. In fact, for a while there was a railway museum house there. The original signal box was on the Plymouth-bound side. The railway was doubled between Teignmouth and Newton in 1865, and 10 years later a second track was added along here between Starcross and Dawlish, which is our next station stop. This building was opened in 1875. There was an engine house here as well. It was built of limestone and quite different from the one at Starcross. It was to the north of the station and built right up against the cliff. It was demolished in 1873 to make room for freight sidings. The remains of the engine house can now be seen right next to the station car park. The section of track between here at Dawlish and Teignmouth that presents so many challenges to today's engineers also tested the Edwardians. This was the last bit to be double-tracked. The short section through the 5 tunnels west of Dawlish through to Smugglers Lane was completed and opened in October 1905. More than 20 years earlier, in July 1884, the section from the west end of Parsons Tunnel to Teignmouth Old Quay was doubled. This work included the opening up of the 320-yard-long East Cliff Tunnel at Teignmouth and the construction of this skew bridge over the resulting cutting to carry East Cliff Walk. There were engine houses all along the Teign estuary at both Teignmouth and Bishop's Tainton, both of which have now been lost. This brings us to the next one at Newton Abbot. The station here opened in December 1846. The first trains were steam-hauled. From November 1847, some atmospheric trains worked to Newton, and from the following March, all trains used the revolutionary system. But it was costly and inefficient, so the directors of the South Devon Railway pulled the plug and reverted to steam haulage 6 months later in September 1848, making the engine houses totally redundant. The engine house here was to the east of the station, in the distance where those trees are now. Newton Abbot was for many years the site of significant Great Western Railway workshops. Some of the buildings remain. Here, steam engines were stored, serviced and maintained right up to 1966. Carriages and wagons were repaired in another shop, and from 1962 diesel locomotives and multiple units moved into a new facility. Servicing and refuelling here ended in 1981. Today, propellers for yachts, commercial vessels and the military are made here. This shot, taken in the 1990s, shows the extent of the yards, and this was filmed from the same spot just a few weeks ago. The line was extended from here to Totnes in July 1847 and Torre in December 1848. Although engine houses were built here at Torre and at Totnes, the atmospheric system was never extended beyond Newton. Torre Station was the branch terminus until the line was extended through to Torquay and Paynton in 1859. The signal box here dates from 1921. Torre Engine House is opposite this aptly named pub. Its architectural style is rather like the one at Dawlish. It was built with squared limestone blocks and some sandstone dressings with a slate roof. It's Grade 2 listed and has been a pottery and now houses local businesses. The atmospheric engine house at Totnes became part of a milk processing factory in 1934, a use that continued until 2007. It was listed Grade 2 in 2008 after a sustained campaign to save it from demolition. The original Brunel design chimney was demolished many years ago. So what happened to the pumping engines? Well, one found its way to a lead mine near Ashburton, and some of the pipe was used to drain the marshes at Goodrington for the Dartmouth and Torbay Railway Company. And what about the future of the engine house here at Totnes? Well, that's been subject to some hot local debate. After a planning appeal earlier this year, it looks now as if it'll find a community use within a development including housing and some business units.